I know the media would like to see a lot of conflict, but there isn't actually a lot of conflict here. The growing gap between the top end of town or the rich and the squeeze that's been on the middle and the pressure on the working class around the world has led to the rise of populism.
More means testing would probably be a good idea.
Well, there's a number of things we might do or could do, and that may or may not be one of them. The fact is she's likely to be the senior partner in their coalition.
Is One Nation now a bigger threat, do you think, than the coalition to One Nation? As hundreds of delegates and observers at the ALP's 50th National Conference celebrate the history of the party, Labor's current dominance of the Parliament after 2 election wins and set policy directions for the future, there's also an awareness here in Adelaide that the political winds are shifting. The rise of One Nation this year has been crushing for the Liberal and National parties, but it is also posing a threat to Labor, a threat being taken very seriously by some in the party. Among them, Wayne Swan, who's just wrapped up 8 years as National President of the ALP. The former Treasurer has been bestowed with life membership of the Labor Party at this conference, and he warns One Nation is now the biggest electoral threat to his party. Is that an overstatement or a fair read of the new landscape? And what does it mean for Labor? How should it respond to this dynamic? I'm David Speers on Ghana Country in Adelaide at the Labor Conference. Welcome to Insiders on Background. Wayne Swan, welcome to you.
Great to be here. But
how many Labor conferences would this be for you?
Well, the first one I attended was actually at Adelaide in 1979. And it became quite a spectacle because that's when Bob Hawke was beginning to stalk Bill Hayden's leadership of the party.
Right.
But the first time I went to a state conference was 1984 as a delegate.
In Queensland?
In Queensland. It was quite a raucous conference. It showed the Labor Party in all of its finest conflict. And indeed, the very first vote of that conference in 1984 in Queensland was whether Wayne Swan should be a delegate to the conference.
Right.
And I won that vote 101 to 100. Anyway, because of my
and the
time...
rest is history.
No, but because of my time in Canberra, Fred Daly, who I knew very well and was a very funny man, rang me up and said, Wayne, don't worry about it. The smaller the margin, the less people you got to thank.
Very true, very true.
Yeah.
Well, just on that, before we get to One Nation, you mentioned how raucous it was back in those days. There's no doubt the party conference has changed a lot over the years, very controlled now. Why is that? Is it a good thing, a bad thing? Do you pine for those fireworks?
No, I most certainly don't pine for losing elections or having conferences turn into ugly spectacles. I don't pine for that at all.
Yeah.
Because the Labor Party, if it is anything, has to be a party of government. Not at any cost or not at any price. But we have to be absolutely at our best to represent the Australian people
but is there
and
a risk
give them what they expect.
You lose a bit of authenticity and not having transparent debates on the floor. They're all happening behind closed doors.
Well, I don't think we do really, because I know the media would like to see a lot of conflict, but there isn't actually a lot of conflict here. There's a lot of agreement because I think people understand how high the stakes are now. I mean, around the world, what's happening with authoritarianism, social democratic parties have not fared well in the last 10 or 20 years, and we understand that if we don't be our very best at both developing policy and communicating it to the people that really need us, then we'll fail like so many other social democratic parties have.
Well, let's talk about this dynamic, this rise. You've seen, and certainly in Queensland, the rise and fall of One Nation over the years, but now is it something different, this solid support that One Nation's getting nationally right now? What do you put that down to, and how concerning is it for you?
Well, I mean, globally we're seeing this, and it's not a surprise that we're seeing some of it here. Our defences against it are much stronger here because we have a strong electoral system, it's independent, we have a better news information system and so on. But it comes from a number of things. I think first and foremost, growing inequality around the world, prolonged inequality, the economic...
Which you date back to, I guess, the global financial crisis.
Well before then, but the global financial crisis set it on fire. Because you might recall the Tea Party was then formed in the United States and on and on and on, and it led to Trump. We didn't have the same dislocation here because we had a government that protected our people and stimulated our economy. But the growing gap between the top end of town or the rich and the squeeze that's been on the middle and the pressure on the working class around the world has led to the rise of populism.
And so does Labor need to take some responsibility for that as well?
Well, Labor in this country, I think, has done a better job of distributing wealth and income with a degree of fairness than just about any other advanced country in the world in the last 20 or 30 years. But even here, people feel pressured. At the moment, insecurity is fed by international events, what's happening in the Gulf, and these prolonged bursts of inflation that we've seen not just recently from the Gulf but also earlier have put immense pressure on living standards. And our task at this conference, our task has been since we've come to government, to absolutely deal with those cost of living pressures to ensure that working class people in particular get a fair go.
I might come back to some of those economic challenges, but immigration is undoubtedly an issue for many of those supporting One Nation right now. How do you view that? Is that just a consequence of the cost of living concerns, that there's an effort to blame migration, or is there a legitimate concern?
Well, let's just take housing. I mean, a lot of people want to blame the housing crisis on immigration, but there are far deeper structural problems in our housing market than those caused by immigration. So the government's dealing with that, and they've dealt with that in a very significant and structural way. It's a sort of structural reform we need in this country to ensure that we can grow and grow fairly. In this case, giving younger people a chance to get into the housing market. People will identify immigration as one of the problems in that policy area, but it's not the main problem. But nevertheless, it's legitimate for people to be concerned about the levels of migration, whether our infrastructure is up to scratch, whether all of our other social policies fit with that. But this is a country that has been always had a relatively significant level of migration, and it has been good for the country and it's been good for our economy.
So is this rise in support for One Nation we've seen over the last 6 months, is this something permanent? Is this a structural change, do you think, on the right of Australian politics?
Oh, I think there's certainly a structural change on the right of Australian politics, because essentially, and I've watched this in the area that I live in, Brisbane, the Liberal Party has virtually ceased to exist. Its membership is very thin. They don't really have the boots on the ground. You saw in the last federal election they were bringing in all sorts of weird groups to staff the polling booths, and there's been a lot of controversy about that. It's a lesson to the Labor Party to not go down that road, and that's why this conference is so important. And one of the things that we have to do is to resolve at this conference, not just through our platform, but through our organisational arrangements, to go back and redouble our efforts to increase the size of our party, lest we go down the road of the Liberal and National parties.
That's an interesting point. So you want to see Labor grow in its membership numbers.
It is absolutely imperative for us to grow our membership numbers if we are to be a successful party in the next 20 and 30 years, as successful as we have been, particularly since 1972. I think a lot of people fail to appreciate that we've become much more a party of government since 1972. And since 1972, we've been in federal government almost half the time. Prior to that, we were only in power for about 20% of the time. So we've become a serious party of government in the last 30 or 40 years, and we want to stay one.
And clearly you want to stay there. Is One Nation, given this structural change, is One Nation now a bigger threat, do you think, than the coalition to One Nation?
Well, I think they're all pretty much the same. I mean, whether it's One Nation, whether it's a Liberal Party, or whether it's a National Party, or whether it's various other forms that we've seen in this country, they are conservatives, and they are conservatives to the point that they don't share the basic value that the Labor Party has at its core: fairness of opportunity, equality of opportunity.
The coalition technically is the opposition in Parliament, but are you saying that Labor, when it comes to the political debate, needs to be treating One Nation effectively as an equal opposition or a more important opposition?
Well, it's part of the opposition. What the next election will be fought between will be the Labor Party on one side and some form of a coalition between One Nation, the Libs and the Nats.
I mean, we should point out Angus Taylor has said, no, there will be no coalition with One Nation. But are you saying that is an inevitable outcome, whether you call it a coalition
or... as to whether they would put One Nation last on the ballot paper.
No.
And until they answer that question, we're entitled to assume that they will work together as a coalition in some form.
Is it realistic, do you think, that One Nation could win more seats than the coalition?
Oh, entirely realistic. I mean, have a look at the result in South Australia, and there are parts of the country where they could easily overtake,
including Labor parts of the country. Should Labor be worried about losing seats?
Well, you might recall that Pauline Hanson first won her seat of Oxley in 1996 off the Labor Party. That was the year that I was defeated in 1996 in the wipeout that occurred that year. And she then subsequently lost that seat at the next election. So Pauline Hanson's been around for a while. She just didn't turn up yesterday.
But where do you see the biggest threat from One Nation to Labor? Is it those Queensland seats, Hunter Valley seats, Central Coast seats, or what sort of seats?
Broadly in outer suburban and regional Australia, there will be a strong One Nation vote. Always has been since the very beginning, since Pauline won that election. It's gone up and down, but it's generally been more outer suburban and regional, which is why she's such a threat to the Liberals and Nationals.
So what should Labor be doing as it looks at this new landscape?
Well, what Labor should be doing is what we're doing here at this conference, David. First and foremost, not putting forward a platform and a set of governing policies which create wealth and spread opportunity. That's what the Labor Party was formed to do.
That seems to be the same strategy as we've seen deployed successfully at the last couple of elections against the coalition. Is it the same strategy, or should there be some difference when it comes to tackling One Nation?
Well, at the end of the day, they don't believe in any of the foundations of wealth creation and spreading it fairly. I mean, all of them are hostile to workers' rights. We've seen Pauline Hanson out there eating away, if you like, or arguing against unfair dismissal laws, domestic violence leave. She went to the press club and said that it should be easier to sack workers. I mean, there's a very hostile view of working Australians embedded in the DNA, not only of One Nation, but of the Liberal and National parties. They've got a lot in common when it comes to living standards and industrial issues.
And do you think Labor leaders and senior figures need to be cautious about taking on Pauline Hanson specifically, or should they just treat her as they would a coalition opponent?
Oh, I think we should just treat her as we treat the coalition. But the fact is, she's likely to be the senior partner in their coalition. But we should be less worried about how we treat them, and more concerned, as we are, with developing the policies that deliver the real change for this country, how we create wealth and how we spread opportunity. And that's what we've seen, for example, in the recent tax changes delivered by the Prime Minister and the Treasurer. A real fundamental structural change in an area of the market that has been disadvantaging young Australians for too long and leading to far greater inequality and distorting our tax system. Those sorts of structural reforms, their heritage goes back to the Hawke-Keating years, and we're continuing that, because first and foremost, you've got to create the wealth before you can spread it. And creating wealth and spreading opportunity is what we're all about.
Well, I want to talk to you about that. We've seen some criticism of what Labor's done in the budget, but more broadly from even former Labor figures like Bill Kelty, the productivity challenge, the budget problems with too much spending and the debt and deficit aren't being tackled strongly enough. What do you think about that?
Well, I think sort of former treasurers and others who are ghosts of the past will always have a role and provide outside commentary. But I think Bill Kelty's very much entitled to his view. I respect him highly for what he did. I don't agree with the comments that he made about the tax changes. I do agree, and the government agrees, that our first priority has to be creating wealth, lifting productivity. If you can't lift productivity, it's hard to lift living standards. We're having quite an unbalanced discussion of where living standards are in this country at the moment. Inflation's put a lot of pressure on incomes, but we have done much better than the rest of the world when it comes to living standards over the last 4 or 5 years, but it's been obscured or run over by an inflationary surge and events in the Middle East. We can be proud that we've achieved that. But when we say that we've achieved that, that's not going to ever be enough for those that are getting left behind and squeezed in an inflationary surge. So Bill can provide his recipes to that, but I think the government has handled all of that very, very professionally and competently.
Is it doing enough, though, on productivity? I know we hear governments talk about this. It's elusive.
Yeah, well, we do hear a lot of people talk about productivity, and most people who do, it's not quite sure what they mean. Right, but let's just go back to the basics on productivity. Productivity is how you lift your output more efficiently. And the fact is that productivity around the world has been stalled in most advanced countries in recent times. You won't find a country outside of the United States that's had a very significant improvement in their productivity. And the productivity improvement in the United States is largely drawn from AI. So getting productivity to improve is really a function of what's going on with technological change in your society. And when technological change is there, you'll get spurts in productivity. And the big challenge for governments in that environment is to make sure the productivity gains, when they come, are spread more fairly around the community. The productivity gains in the US over the last couple of, I say, 40 years have largely gone to the top 1% and 10%. Productivity gains in this country over that same period have been more fairly spread across our workforce because we've got a bigger and better industrial safety net, decent wages and working conditions, and a far greater attention to a social safety net.
But does that mean if the real benefits right now are coming from technology, we should embrace the AI?
Well, we should shape the AI, as the Prime Minister said at the conference
Don't put too
yesterday.
many barriers in its way.
No, well, it's not a question of barriers. AI is going to change the way we interact and the way we work, and it's going to have a fundamental impact on our society. We can't change that. But what we can put in place are the rules of engagement, as we've continued to do over a long period of time. And the government is outlining all of the responses to that at this conference. That's a very important part of it. People can say we're not talking about productivity. Well, we are, because we are the party that has always particularly stressed the importance of skills training, but most importantly, spreading the benefits of the productivity across the workforce by the collective arrangements we have in our economy.
And when it comes to the budget and government spending, you as Treasurer, certainly in that period before the GFC hit, went to great lengths to try and means test a lot of the payments you inherited from the Howard government. These days, a lot of government payments, whether it's paid parental leave, childcare, means testing doesn't seem to be a priority. Does that concern you?
I do think as we talk about the future shape of budgets and discuss how we're going to meet our fiscal challenges and how we actually have higher levels of productivity, may have to have a look at some of that into the future. But it's not going to be, the magic solution to all of the challenges.
But every bit helps, right?
Every bit helps. It's really important we have a budget which for the long term is in good shape. And by and large, our budget is in much better shape than just about any other budget in the world.
But a bit more means testing would probably be a good idea.
Well, there's a number of things we might do or could do, and that may or may not be one of them. But if you wanted to be in any country in the world and talking about sorting out your fiscal arrangements, be here. Because as you're aware, and most of your listeners are aware, budgets across the Western world got blown to smithereens by COVID, and they haven't recovered. And it would be madness to try and shrink your budget too quickly in the face of the sort of uncertainty that we see around the world right now.
Final one for you, Wayne Swan. As we record this today, Donald Trump's just whacked a whole range of new tariffs on Australia and plenty of other trade partners as well, on the grounds that this has to do with us not doing enough about imported goods that may use forced labour. Obviously, the Australian government reckons that's baloney, and these tariffs are completely unfair. What do you think about?
It's an act of economic vandalism against their allies. Nothing more and nothing less. I mean, it's terribly destructive in terms of the global economy, and I think very much ill-directed towards a friend.
So how should Australia respond to that?
Well, it's a difficult job in the current sort of global set of arrangements to do anything other than manage them as best you can. I don't think just standing on the sidelines pot-shotting a particular decision here or there is going to make any difference. And I think this government has been very deft at its diplomacy in handling not only the United States but also the EU, and most spectacularly in recent times, the progress we've made in the Pacific.
Wayne Swan, congratulations on your life membership of the Labor Party, and thanks so much for joining us here at on the sidelines of this 50th ALP conference.
Pleasure.
And we'll have more on the wash-up from the ALP conference on Insiders Sunday morning. The Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, will be our guest. Hope you can join us for that. PK back in the podcast feed on Monday, and we'll see you again at the end of the week. Bye for now.
You're making us all feel very excited about being here.